This is a speech in Likuti Sichot Beit, second book of Likuti. What happened? Okay. This is a book. Yeah. Yes. Okay. It is a speech by the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he gave. It's really quite a long speech, but this is at least the first part of it that he made in the year, and I'll tell you in just one moment. One moment, here it is. In the year 1956. 1956. In other words, 5 years after he assumed the leadership. Wegen Heinteke Shabbos, regarding this Shabbat. Shabbat Chazon. Is Farana Vort, there is a saying, Fun Harav HaKodesh, from the holy Rabbi Reb Levi Yitzchok of Berditchev. Reb Levi Yitzchok Berditchever. Nishmaso Eden, of blessed memory. His soul is in heaven. As that, B'Shabbos Chazon, that on this Shabbat, Shabbat Chazon, it's called Shabbat Chazon. Why is it called Shabbat Chazon? Because we read the Haftorah is Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah. I put it up on on our YouTube site. On the YouTube site. It's the first paragraph in Isaiah, the book of Isaiah. Wegen Heinteke Shabbos, it says that it's called the Rebbe Levi Yitzchok of Berditchev said, as b'Shabbat Chazon Yeshayahu, that's what it's called, the vision of Isaiah. Vased men we see, it is shown to us, their base of Mikdash Shlishi, the third temple. Chazon means like a vision, but Chazon also means to see. Prophetic vision. But it also means that we'll see the third temple. Now, a person can ask, what do you mean? What does that mean? How can we see the third temple? Would you have to go to Jerusalem? It says, no, the third temple, this is a little bit hard to believe, but it says it even in the Gemara. Even in the Gemara it says. There's a sentence in the song that the Jewish people sang when they went over Yam Suf, they went over the sea, and right at the end of that song that they sang, they said, Mikdash Hashem Konan Yadecha, the how holy temple of God, God will make. You're going to make it yourself. So it says, what does it mean that it'll be made? So it says that the third temple is already ready. It's just ready to come down to be revealed. I don't know what it's going to be. The gist of the whole thing is we don't know what reality is. When real reality is revealed, there's going to be the raising of the dead. We don't see that the Jewish bodies are really eternal. And we don't see that anything that's holy is really eternal. In any case, I don't think I really understand this, but that's what it says in the books. So the fact is that we don't know what reality is, and the holy third temple is really real, but we don't see it because we don't have real eyes. But on this Shabbat, we do get real eyes, a little bit. And we can see, we can get a vision of the third temple, how it's waiting in its how do you say, nascent state, and there's such a word like that, in its preparatory fetal state, I don't know what it is, waiting. Nor thus is a zen, this is just seeing from their vetas, we see it but far away. Riyam rachok. Was thus is, we see it very small. Was oich der inyan, which is also this thing of Shabbat Chazon, right? Was thus is the inyan, this is the whole idea of Shabbat Chazon, that we see the third temple from far away. Loitem, according to this, Vetman verstehen, we can understand the Sheikh is the connection between Shabbat Chazon. Second, 1 minute. Is there someone waiting? Yes, there is. Very good. Okay. Loitem, according to this, Vetman verstehen, we can also understand the connection between Shabbat Chazon and this Torah portion. The Torah portion is called Dvorim. Was the Kavios from Shabbat Chazon is Alamal Parshas Devarim. With this Haftorah that we read this first chapter of Isaiah always comes out in the first chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. Mit Parshas Devorim in the book of Deuteronomy, Mishnah Torah. This begins what's called the repetition of the Torah. I guess that's where the name Deuteronomy comes. Is the do means two. What's Deuteronomy mean? I don't know, figure it out. Somehow or other that means the repetition of the Torah. Voschach as is dach in Torah, which this is in Torah. Dach is Andrish, but it's different. Mishnah Torah from the Friedeke Chumashim Darmit. The repetition of the four previous books. The fact is, it's not 100% repetition. There's a lot of new laws that are revealed. I think several hundred new laws that are revealed, 100 at least. Was Mishnah Torah, which the book of Deuteronomy, Devorim, is Gezak Geveren Sum Dor was said to the generation was Arangegangen, which went into the land of Israel. And therefore, Hot men Gadar, they had to Bavarnan, they had to warn the Jews to teach them Gavezi and Yanim about certain new things. Was free, which previously, when they were wandering in the desert, Hot men they nit Gadar to Bavezi, they didn't have to know. Did not warn them. You didn't have to warn them. You didn't have to teach them. Draw their attention to them. And it was the whole Torah. This is a big mystery, but the fact is, the whole entire Torah was given on Mount Sinai. Even with the Gemara and all the Mishnahs and everything was given on Mount Sinai, with all the laws. But it was revealed little by little. Something like but there used to be. I don't know how there is now. There used to be movie. You'd see a movie. You just get a reel. You'd go to the store, you get a reel. I guess they used to have also in the videos, when they used to have these boxes with videos in it. Anyway, so you get that video, the whole thing is right there, but it reveals itself little by little. Same thing in Mount Sinai, God gave the whole business, but he revealed it little by little. And these are laws that Moses revealed in the book of Deuteronomy. These are laws that are relevant to the Jews going into the land of Israel. The difference between the generation that was in the desert, the 40 years they wandered in the desert, and the generation that went into the land of Israel was Dor Amidbar, the generation that was in the desert, is Gevena Dor Dea. They were a generation that they knew and they felt God. Und sie seinen Geven in their Midrega, they were at such a level as almost the same thing as Moses was. Was had Ria, he saw godliness. The Jewish people in the desert, listen, most of them in the desert, they had seen God at Mount Sinai. Only a small number got killed by God with the golden calf. But everyone else saw God, and Moses got forgiveness for them. So they saw God at Mount Sinai. They saw it. And those people that were born in the desert, they all saw that bread was falling from heaven and water came from a rock. I mean, maybe they thought that was just a natural process. I don't know. Because that's the only thing that they knew. And they were surrounded by clouds of glory all the time, and there were amazing miracles that happened over there. So that generation in the desert, they lived with God all the time. Their food came from God, their bread came from God, their protection came directly. They saw it. It says not only that, spiritually, they were on the level of seeing godliness. It said, the Rebbe says one of the reasons they didn't want to go into the land of Israel was because they wanted to learn Torah. They just wanted to be holy, and they knew what it meant to be holy. They saw godliness. That's the generation that was wandering in the desert. But the generation that came into the land of Israel was they have been showing Gahat, which they already had Sutan with Gashmirs, which now they're going to have to deal with the physical world, right? No more bread from heaven. You're going to have to plow, and you're going to have to plant. You're going to have to fertilize. You're going to have to harvest. You're going to have to grind the wheat and bake the bread. And all these steps something went wrong. That's it. You don't have any bread. As by these, and they had enemies when they were in the land of Israel. They had to go in and fight the nations that would. Had by Zebamele gefelt in them inyan from Ria and Elokus. So by going into the Israel, they lacked this seeing and direct experience of God in every moment of their lives. By Zayin, with those Jews that were going to go into the land of Israel, is given mer nid veshmia. They just heard about godliness. Azoy v'yashteit, like it says, Ata Yisrael Shema, listen. Right, like us, we have to read the Mimers and we understand that, maybe could be that there's God and God is creating everything. God really did give the Torah, but I don't see it. And if a person comes to you and says, what are you talking about? I don't see God. What do you believe in? And you have to be honest and say, listen, I also don't see, but I just believe, Why do you believe? I have this feeling, this guy says he has a feeling that, you have to bow down to the moon. And this guy has a feeling you have to bow down to dogs or something. Who knows what people believe in? So what's the difference between your belief and the other person's belief? He says, this is a very big problem. That's what's called leaving the desert. In the desert, there was big revelations of God, right? Big revelations of God, but that now they're going to come into the land of Israel. They're going to have to deal with real problems and test their devotion to the Creator. And this is a little bit different. In the desert, the 40 years that they were in the desert, they saw godliness. And now when they came to the land of Israel, they're only going to hear. They'll understand there's such a thing. The difference between seeing and hearing is, as b'shas amen zet, when a person sees something, this is unlimited. He sees. Und das is nit kein Mitzrayim. There's no limitations to it. When you see some das says, this means as kein inyan vet im nit riren. If you really saw that something happened, nothing can move him. As by im zollen veren sfekos, that they should have any doubts as in the thing. Right? I saw that there's a house over here. There's a house. I know that there's a house on number 5 Elm Street. That's the house. There it is. I saw it. I was there. I was inside of the house. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. Right? If a person says, you really saw it, well, I didn't exactly see it. But I did hear from somebody who saw it. So that's it. You can't really give testimony in a court on just hearsay. When you see something, that's certain. As vibalt as airline, hat em gesen, because you saw it. Aber shmia, but hearing, as men heard azach, when you hear something, is chach b'shas ma'aseh, even though the time when you hear it, verte inyan was heard opulate by him, it's very, very certain by him. This is very common in politics, right? Politics, you get a politician that really knows how to speak, and he can convince you, communism is the truth, communism is a work, and I believe me, I this, and you hear this person and he's speaking and you understand it and he's right, it's just, and I'm just so enthusiastic. But when you see it comes out, you go to Venezuela or something, you see it doesn't work at all. So on one hand, all the convincing in the world, no, you don't understand. That was an exception. That wasn't, could be, but man, I saw it. I saw what happens. So hearing can be very convincing and it can be very deep, but when you see something, in a way, it's above being convincing. It's certain. From Desvega, nevertheless, is durach akasha, but if you have a question, when you hear something, you can be very certain of it. But if somebody asks a good question, can by their inyan upgefrekt werden, it can be knocked down. Was does beves, this indicates as oich b'shas di zach, this thing is by him. Upgelek, it's certain, he thinks it's certain, but it is, but granted, it's limited. When you just hear about something. Therefore, it is in Mishnah Torah. Therefore, when the Jews in Mishnah Torah was as is gezagt. I gave you an example. Let me give you the opposite example. Something that says something, but it's not true. Let's say somebody says something that is true, right? Your parents tell you that God exists and that the Jewish people have an obligation to God and the Torah is good and the mitzvahs are good. And then all of a sudden comes along the communists or the Holocaust or something. And you see that anyone who's a Jew gets punished. So you have an obvious question. What's going on over here? When my father told me I believed 100%, but now I see in front of my eyes, doesn't seem to be, right? So you go and you ask your father, Dad, what's going on over here? And your father says, listen, this is exactly what I was talking about. That God is something that's not visible clearly in the world, but he's our creator. And he was revealed at Mount Sinai. And you are a Jew, right? Yes. Can you explain what it means to be a Jew? No. but Daddy, can you explain what it means, this Holocaust? So the explanations don't exactly sit so well with you, but the pain and the suffering, you see it. Now the question is, do you see God like your father sees it? Your father says, no matter what happens, I'm still going to believe in God. My belief is like seeing. He has the fortitude. He's connected to his Jewish identity, and he sees it. But if somebody doesn't see it, he just understands it. So then it can be easily knocked down. Therefore, that's the whole reason that they have Mishnah Torah. That's why they have the book of Deuteronomy, was gesagt geworden, which was said to the generation just before they went into the land of Israel. Eretz Canaan was by Zay, because by them is given was Mirnid Madriga Shmia, because up to now they only heard about godliness in the desert. They only heard about godliness. They heard God creates the world and everything, but everything was for them. And that's a level of godliness which can be understood. Of course, God's good. He gives me bread every morning. He gives me water from a rock. But true godliness is above understanding. They, in the desert, they just understood clearly that God is good. They had all these proofs and everything. Hot man they gedarved on, but they had to come. Get over here 1 second. I'll move these things away. And next page. Let's see, how do I turn the page over here? There we go. It's a little bit bigger. Zochtov them Inyan from Mesiras Nefesh. Now they're coming into the land of Israel. They have to have a new connection with God, which is called Mesirut Nefesh, self-sacrifice. When they were in the desert, it was self-realization, self-expression, self-aggrandizement, self-certainty, all these things about self, which now we worship so much in our modern day society. It's all, you have to express yourself, you have to find yourself, you have to do yourself, all yourself. When they came into the desert, they had to give themselves away. Mesirut Nefesh. They had to forget about themselves. That's true connection to God. Suddenly they realized that everything they had before was just like hearing about it. It wasn't really godliness. They couldn't stand in the challenge. Was there them Dora Midbar, the generation that was in the desert, Hat men does nit gedarvt an zogen, the people that were in the desert, they did not have to be warned or taught about these self-sacrifices. There was nothing to sacrifice yourself for in the desert. God protected them, he fed them. But that's not a human being. A human being is meeting challenges. That's why we're here. Deswegen, nevertheless, the Torah, so this generation that came into the land of Israel, even though they were on lower level, right? They were on lower level, is given the Nidruker from them Dora Midbar. They were lower from the generation of the desert. Is Bazei given a Mila. There was a good thing, which is nit given by Dora Midbar, namely Darfenstein Doch by their Dora Midbar. Therefore, it says in the generation of the desert, you did not come until now to the final place. Was thus is given in Shiloh. This was in Shiloh and in Jerusalem. Nor does them, noch dem, vi, ze, seinen, even after they were already into the land of Israel, Davka specifically, that's the point of Judaism. So here we go. We see how Judaism is totally different from anything else in the whole world. God took the Jews out of Egypt. He freed them, took them to Mount Sinai. At Mount Sinai, he gave them the Torah. He took them into the desert, and they were protected. They got it. They got the result, and it was worth it. They suffered for a long time, but now they're in the desert, and it is, how do you say, heaven on earth. Heaven on earth. They're in the desert, they're protected, they got water, and that's the purpose of the Jewish people. that God will protect us and He will provide for us and He will give us holiness. And that's it. Right? Wrong. That's not the purpose of the Jewish people. That's just like being in the womb. Right? It's like a child being born. Mazel tov, your wife is pregnant. That's it. What do you mean that's it? Let the baby alone. Let him, why should he come into the world? The world is a terrible place. It's all suffering and everything like that. Stays in the womb, gets everything for free. That's the ideal situation. Mazel tov. No, I'm going to give birth. That's a cruel thing to do, give birth. Says, no, then he becomes a human being. The same thing the Jewish people. The Jewish people were in the desert. They were like a baby in the womb, and they received everything from God, and they were connected to God. And that is the purpose of the Jewish people, right? That we are connected to God, and we get the blessings, not those other religions. They are not, says the Rebbe, that's not so. That's a big lie. The purpose of the Jewish people is to be in this world and not to receive, to improve this physical world. And the only way you can do that is by not thinking about yourself. You have to be a vessel for godliness. We'll be the only nation that doesn't think about themselves, and we'll teach everybody else to do the same thing. Was thus is given, but that means self-sacrifice. You have to sacrifice yourself. You have to give over yourself. That's the whole thing. Was in Shiloh and Yerushalayim. Shiloh, the holy temple, was in Shiloh for like 369 years. It was the Mishkan. And then eventually there were two more stops. Then it went to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was there permanent. What was there? It worked with the physical world and revealed godliness. But after Zion in the land of Israel, only that's when they came to the purpose of why they were created. Their time, the reason is, by descending into the world, which they began with physical things coming into the lowest levels, only by means of this can be carried out the true intention of binyan menucha v'nachala, of making a permanent dwelling for God. Kumt also comes out as their inyan from Shabbos, the whole Shabbos, this Shabbat that we're in now, they're on at the beginning from Mishnah Torah, which is the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. Veist oifa far einikum. This shows on a unification between two opposites, as is a Yerida Gadol. It's a tremendous descent of the Jewish people. And Durach there Yerida, but only by means of this descent of the Jewish people, leaving the holiness and the godliness of the desert, where God provided for them and revealed himself to them, but only by this descent into the land of Israel, where they're going to have to do everything on their own. Durach dem davka is an amiti, that's the true elevation. There's Zelbin, and the same thing as in the Shabbat Chazon. In Shabbat Chazon, there are two opposites. This Shabbat, on one hand, we say what? That it's one of the 9 days from the time of Rosh Chodesh Av until Tisha B'Av, worst, most miserable days in the calendar, when they're approaching every day closer to remembering the temple being destroyed. One of the 9 days. But even more, so it's a tremendous descent, even more. This is the Shabbat, which is right before Tisha B'Av, the time of the destruction of the temple, the time of the you say the weakening, the fatal blow to Jewish identity. Just by a miracle, we're still holding on. Aber from the Tzveita Zayit, that's the lowest of the low. But on the other hand, is Durach Dem Yerida only by means of this descent into exile. Hatman, the Tachlis, we have the ultimate elevation. Like we said in the name of the Rabbah Kodesh, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, that on this Shabbat we can see from far away the third temple. The Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, he brings an example, and he says it's like a king that gives his son, he has a beloved son that he loves him more than anything else, and he gives him a beautiful, tremendously expensive garment. And the son immediately takes the garment and he goes out and he plays football with it or something, and he wants to show it off to his friends. And he comes back and the whole thing is wrecked. So his father said, "What did you do?" He said, "Oh, I played football. You gave me the garment." He said, No, I should have given you the rules. And I guess it was a little bit hard for you. Here, I'll give you another. And this one, don't wreck, okay? Don't do things. And the son wrecks the second one. And he comes back to his father and said, "What did you do?" He said, "Oh, sorry, Second one is wrecked." So the father said, after a few weeks, my son, I made you a third garment. And this is even nicer than the other ones. And it is, you can't destroy it, but I'm not going to give it to you. Because if I give it to you, you'll find a way to mess it up. So I'm going to, every year on your birthday, I'm going to show you this garment from far away. And it's so splendid and so beautiful, but at least you know that I still love you and the garment is waiting for you as soon as you change your ways. Right? And the son is thinking, well, I can't wait to get my hands on this garment. One of my friends in the football team will really like this one. So the father knows what the son is thinking. So he says, I'm showing it to him from far away. As soon as you get your act together, I'm going to give it to you. But it's here. You should know I love you. That's what Rebbe Lubavitcher said. That Shabbat Chazon, we can see the holy temple, the third temple, was is hech, which is higher from the first two holy temples, like the Rebbe explained in the Dvar Malchut. Yibanesh, may it be built quickly in our days by means of the Moshiach. Okay, now story. Oh no, Yom Yom. Yom Yom.